Okay, we are ready to continue, to resume. I'd like to move to the next submission, which is an oral presentation from Mr. Jonah Schein, MPP Davenport, as outlined in CMD 13M51.33. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking you all for the opportunity to present here today. My name is Jonah Schein, and I represent the provincial riding of Davenport in the Ontario Legislature. I want to especially thank the CNSC for coming here today and for obliging the request that we made to move the meeting from Ottawa to Toronto so that people in our community could have a chance to speak and hear from you directly. And recognize to begin with that the facility is mostly regulated by the federal government, but I think it's important that I'm here to represent my community. I was elected at Queen's Park in October of 2011, but it was just over a year ago that I first learned that GE-Hitachi operates a uranium processing facility in my riding at 1025 Lansdowne Avenue. I grew up on St. Clair Avenue West and have lived and worked in the Davenport West community for many years, but in all that time I'd never heard of this facility until I read a story about it in the newspaper. And this was the same case for many people in our community, including many people who were longtime residents. So when news of this facility broke out in the newspaper, many residents were really concerned. They were concerned about the safety of the facility, they were concerned about their health and the health of their families, and they were upset that they had not known about a uranium facility that was operating in their own neighborhood until they read about it in the newspaper. In the years since we first learned about this issue, I've partnered with our local Member of Parliament, Andrew Cash, who I believe was here earlier today, and I partnered with Mr. Cash and local residents to get information for our community to bring greater accountability to this facility and to ensure that constituents are safe. On December 8th, 2012, MP Cash and I hosted a community meeting where residents came together to express their concerns, to learn more information, and to ask questions about the plant and about the CNSC's role and oversight of this facility. That meeting allowed local residents to start to get some of the answers that they're looking for from the CNSC. CNSC employees Patsy Thompson and Peter Elder, who's here tonight, attended that meeting, and I hope that they've described it to you. At that meeting, we heard from families who live close to the facility who were concerned about the safety of eating the food that they grew in their own gardens. We heard from families who were worried about the safety of their children playing in local playgrounds and schools and parks, and we heard from residents who questioned whether the operations of the GE-Hitachi facility had contributed to their specific health problems. And this is why I requested the Ministry of the Environment to conduct soil testing earlier this year. But there remain unanswered questions about the GE-Hitachi facility on Lansdowne and the CNSC's commitment to oversight. Residents still want to know why they were not informed that for years this plant has processed nuclear fuel pellets within blocks of their homes. And residents remain concerned that the facility has not been open or transparent with our community. This lack of transparency reflects badly on the company and on the CNSC, whose duty it is to enforce regulations and provide oversight for this facility. Principles of accountability and transparency are not only important to our community, they are in fact outlined as part of the conditions placed upon licensees and applicants in the CNSC staff report on the performance of uranium fuel cycle and processing facilities for 2012. In item 1.4, titled Public Information and Disclosure Program, the CNSC report states that, quote, licensees have an important role to inform the public about their nuclear facility and activities. It also lists requirements for a public information and disclosure program, which include the following: development of strategies for open and transparent communication of information, establishment and implementation of rules for public disclosure of information, review and evaluation of the public information and disclosure program for effectiveness and the identification of improvements, and documentation of records to demonstrate that public information and disclosure requirements are met. According to the CNSC's website, these new regulatory requirements were published back in March 2012 as RDGD-99.3 Public Information and Disclosure. And that is months before the news broke of the facility. And yet people in our community can tell you that communication from CNSC and from the facility in question only improved after our community united, and mobilized to get this information. Our community only became aware of this facility months after these regulations came into effect, and not because the facility took steps to outreach and inform the community, but because a reporter broke the story in the newspaper. This behavior from the facility and from the CNSC does not inspire confidence in our community. I also want to make sure it's understood that before these new regulations were published in March of 2012, there was still a requirement for the facility to have a public information program. This was mandated under Regulatory Guide G-217, Licensee Public Information Programs, a document that was originally published by the CNSC back in 2004. So to be clear, the requirement for a public information program existed long before news broke of the facility and long before the facility was approved for a 10-year license renewal back in 2010. Not only was the facility not doing its job in maintaining a proper public information program since at least 2004, but it seems that the CNSC failed to do its job to ensure that the licensee was in compliance. And so it's important, once again, to ask the CNSC why they granted a 10-year license renewal in 2010 with little to no public awareness. Why did they renew the license for 10 years when the facility clearly did not meet the requirements of the Public Information and Disclosure Program? Now, I know that the letter that was signed by Commissioner Secretary Mr. Marc LeBlanc to our office stated that the purpose of today's public meeting is not to reopen the licensing process or to discuss reasons for renewing the plant's license in 2010, that the purpose of today is to update the Commission with the information on the safety and compliance of the facility's current operations. But I have to say that in order to discuss compliance of the facility's current operations, there needs to be some recognition of the facility's history of compliance. People in our community wonder if we would have ever learned about the uranium processing operation from GE-Hitachi or from the CNSC if the story had not been published in the newspaper. Would we even know of its existence the next time it came up for another 10-year license renewal? Or would we have had to find out the hard way at a time of an emergency or a potential accident? I think that's a frightening thought. It seems clear that the CNSC did not take the requirement for a public information and disclosure program seriously, leading up to, during, or following the license renewal. And it's clear that the improvement in communication has been reactive and the result of pressure that our community has put on the Commission and the facility. When you have facilities located in neighborhoods where people live and work and go to school, you owe it to that community to be transparent, to be accountable, and to build a working relationship with them. You have to do this work to earn your social license to operate in a community. And failing to do so damages that trust before it can even be developed. I'm going to return to comments that local resident Don Withers said at that community back in December 2012. Referring to the Commission transcripts, Ms. Withers wondered, quote, if one of GE-Hitachi's terms of commission was to inform the community, and if that could not be verified by the CNSC, and that could have been easily verified, then how can we be reassured that the other things that they were supposed to adhere to in terms of danger to the community were adhered to? Given the facility's history in Davenport, it's not surprising that some community members do not trust GE-Hitachi to fulfill the other conditions of their license, including those relating to health and safety, when it failed to fulfill the public information and disclosure program conditions. And it is also not surprising that the community members question whether the CNSC can be trusted to protect their health and safety when they could not be trusted to ensure this basic level of accountability and transparency from the facility. Davenport residents need to be reassured that GE-Hitachi is adequately informing both the CNSC and the community about their activities, and that the CNSC is doing their due diligence to ensure that this is occurring. Going forward, the CNSC needs to provide better oversight of GE-Hitachi's activities in the community to ensure that community members' interests are protected. Certainly, facilities that are not meeting public information and disclosure program conditions should not be given new 10-year licenses. And if the facility has nothing to hide, then they should have no concerns about being transparent with the public and opening up their license for review. It is incumbent on the company to earn its social license and to earn the trust of the community, and it's incumbent on the federal regulator to regain the public trust in their commitment to oversight and accountability of the industry. because it is clear that the facility did not meet the conditions required. And that's why I asked the CNSC to reopen the license to ensure that the public is properly informed. I want to thank you for taking the time to come to Toronto today and for listening to our communities, and I appreciate the time here to speak tonight.
Thank you. Monsieur Hervé.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. My question is addressed to the staff. At the end of his written presentation, there is a sentence that community members worry that if GE-Hitachi was not fulfilling the PIP conditions set out in the license, how can they be sure that other conditions relating to their health and safety are being met? My question is, to what extent the Hitachi was not in compliance with the license? And if so, what was done by the staff to ameliorate or to bring Hitachi in compliance with the license?
Peter Elder, I'd start, two things I'd like to state on this one is at the license renewal in 2010, staff did require GE to improve its public information program. Admittedly, this was during the licensing process, so in between that time there were 2 hearing days. We made comments about the program on the first hearing day and said it was not currently acceptable and had them revise it before the final decision was made by the Commission. Since then, we noted that there has been a new document that was released in March 2012. This is not a regulation. This is a regulatory document in terms of it's not immediately effective in all the license, but we did contact the licensees and said you must have a transition plan to go to this new requirements, and I'll ask Mike Brinker to say how we approach those.
But before you do that, just for clarity, so remind me again, in 2010, in the hearing, if memory serves, you already found, this is before it became a real public knowledge, you already found that GE-Hitachi did not have a proper public information program.
We had concerns about their public information program, so we had them revise it before the license was issued. And we also, for the first time in 2010, introduced the condition in license that they actually maintain that program through over the license period and not just do activities around license renewal.
Okay.
So in terms of status, I'll ask Amy Rupert to give you a status of our reviews of the public information program.
So currently the public information program by GE-Hitachi does meet the requirements of 99.3 public information and disclosure programs. The purpose and objectives of their new program is to continuously foster public awareness through a variety of new initiatives. It is also a requirement of 99.3 that licensees' programs and implementation be actively managed and adapted to reflect the public's perception of risk and the level of public interest in their activities. And it's also very important to note that the CNSC will continue to enforce those requirements under 99.3 and monitor and evaluate the implementation of their program and their engagement activities and public awareness in the community.
So we now have annual reports. So what would you expect to see next year?
Well, obviously, taking into account everything that's been discussed here today, public views should be analyzed, and we would like to see any improvements, changes to their public program. That should be documented as well. And also, the suggestions brought forward through their Community Liaison Committee, we would like to see any of those recommendations activated as well.
Monsieur Hervé?
Well, it's a little bit vague. You have a very precise points that have to be met by Hitachi in that program. If we compare it with other facilities.
Sorry, but Peter, for record, what I want to say is that, as it's been pointed out, the program has to reflect the needs of the community. So it does have to be evolving to meet the evolving needs of the community. So, it's not a static of saying on paper you have a good program. You also then need to implement it and get the feedback from what the community is saying to continuously improve that program. And where we are now, as Ms. Rupert said, is on paper they have a program that is compliant with the standard. We've also asked them to give us quarterly reports on the implementation so that we can closely monitor that they are actually doing the activities that they said they were going to do. So we have looked at, and we are closely monitoring the compliance of that and that they are doing those programs. And similarly, we closely monitor that they do have those built-in feedback mechanisms that take the results of the public interest and build them into improvements into the program.
Just for example, we were talking of survey. Is there any obligation and citation requirements about the survey? Because this is a way to well understand the needs and the wills of the population around the facilities.
I'll ask Ms. Rupert to give a precise, but it does not require a survey. It requires some means to identify the public attitudes. And there has been a lot of discussions, actually in other hearings, around our surveys, the best mechanisms. They are certainly one type of mechanism that can be used. I'll ask Ms. Rupert to respond to this as well.
Can I ask, Mr. Schein, you are obviously a member of the community here. Many times that we've been skating about what needs to be done. Maybe you can suggest area where the public information can be improved. And I don't know if you actively engage with GE-Hitachi and try to help them actually come up with a good program.
So, I think, I didn't say this in my comments earlier, but I was not, as I said, I wasn't aware of the facility until I heard about it in the newspaper. I wasn't engaged by the facility until after that, at which time I got a tour of the facility. Even though I don't, even though nuclear mostly falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government, I expect that as a local representative at any level that I would have been invited in and made contact with far earlier than I had. And I wonder if that is part of the record that has happened here in the past. Do local politicians, have they been informed of what goes on here? I know clearly, what concerns me is that it's clear that people had no idea about the facility. The vast majority of people had no idea about it. And it concerns me that the CNSC would identify that there was a problem and then give the facility within 24 hours, it seems like, to address that problem, and then give it a 10-year renewal. I'm not sure, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we always had 10-year license renewals. And I have no idea why a 10-year license renewal, a renewal that long, would be granted so soon after hearing that. It was so clearly not in compliance with this basic part.
Staff?
Chairman Jonah, for the record here. As a Chief Regulatory Operations Officer, I really have to set the record straight here with respect to oversight of the CNSC. We reviewed the application of the applicant. We looked at the safety case with respect to safe operation, and the recommendation that was given to the Commission were based on facts with respect to the safety of the facility. Yes, we identified deficiency in the program and in specific for the public information program. The issue here is we put in place requirements to enhance that program. And looking at the risk assessment for the facility, we have taken the oversight to improve that public information program. And that's where we are today. So the updates to the commission will be done on a yearly basis. The outcome of this meeting and actions arising from this meeting will be implemented directed to be implemented by staff in order to have continuous enhancement. So the 10-year is not new to the CNSC. The 10-year license have been granted by the CNSC. As a matter of fact, the CNSC had undetermined license. The licensing term has no issue with respect to regulatory oversight. We evaluate the risk assessment. We evaluate the performance of the licensee. Based on the risk to the health and the public, we will take action. In this case, several things occurred. As the application was presented, improvement to the program by the applicant was presented. In the meantime, the CNSC came up with much more expanded upon regulatory document as a guidance, and we are right now in the implementation phase. We were satisfied with the program as a takeoff point, and then right now we are working on the implementation, we from regulatory oversight, by telling the licensee to meet that regulatory requirement.
Okay, Dr. McDill.
Thank you. Just in terms of the PIP, Public Information Program, when the renewal occurred, we've heard several interveners say it was non-compliant. So could I ask you, was it using the grading that we typically use, fully satisfactory, satisfactory, below expectations, or unacceptable? Where did it sit?
Peter Elder, record, we had not typically and don't typically use the same rating terminology for public information programs. When I said it was a 2-day hearing, just to explain to the Commission, that means that 2-day hearing days to the public said were 60 days apart. So on the first day, we noted deficiencies and said it was actually not acceptable. GE-Hitachi in that 2-month period did do a major revision and resubmitted their public information program. Then we reported back on the second day that there was a acceptable program that met the guidance in place at that time.
Were they, at the time of the first day of the 2-day hearing, compliant or uncompliant?
I would say is in terms of the public, our review was that the public information program that was in their license application, initial license application, was not compliant with the guidance that was available. And they were told that they would have to resubmit that program and submit one that was compliant with the guidance. And they did that before the Commission made the decision.
60 days, well, presumably this decision or this assessment of yours was before the first day as well.
So we had passed that information on to GE-Hitachi in advance of that first day, yes, because their documents would have been available 30 days in advance of that first day. So that they didn't turn around that quickly. They probably had 6 weeks notice before the first day that we had problems with their program.
But before the Commission made its decision, which would be after the second day.
So there was a new program submitted between the first day in that 60-day period. There was a new program that was submitted, that was reviewed, and it was actually extensively discussed at the hearings before the license was issued.
But it's your position that they were, the non-compliance should have prevented the relicensing?
Well, I mean, I think you should tell me, to me, the way I understand it is that was a component of the license agreement. And I think what we've heard is that they weren't compliant at day 1 of the 60-day renewal, and they didn't have time to be compliant, for whatever reason, by the end of the 60-day with renewal period. And then the license was renewed, and in fact, our community still did not hear about it for a year after. I have to understand something. So the CNSC says their job is not enforcement, it is oversight. Is that what I understood? But to me, and that the 10-year that 10-year license renewals are commonplace. It's my understanding this facility never had a 10-year license until now, and it's my understanding as well that shorter licensing period, especially when a license is not compliant, provides enforcement and extra oversight and accountability. And so I have real questions about why it's been extended.
I'm going to go back
years.
to Mr. Jamel, but could you add to it the recent, the 10-year licensing period when it came into effect?
There are a couple of things, though. We're focusing on one element with respect to day one and day two. We have, as we get into the facility, the process of the facility, the application submitted by the applicant, staff review the requirements, and quite a bit of the application, the reason for day two is we assess day one, we come before the commission, provide them with the information, and we clearly stated at the time there are deficiencies in that program, and then in day two, as we always have the options to do, either put a hold point or the licensee establish the program. Between day one and day two, the licensee established a program that is adequate for us to recommend a license renewal. Hence, the staff support and recommended for the commission for the 10-year license on the basis that the licensee will implement the updated program. And then the story goes on to become RD99, so then the continuous enhancement is taking place. On the 10-year license, one of the element of the license renewal for 10-year for a 10-year period is exactly what we're doing today. On a yearly basis, there will be a public meetings addressing the annual reports in the community on a rotational basis. The public will have opportunity to intervene, and this is the first of an annual report where the public intervention is being put in place in support of a 10-year license. So the transparency is maintained, the engagement of the public with respect to the regulatory oversight, which encompasses enforcement, if we need to do enforcement, and then we will continue with the oversight to ensure that the public information program will meet the requirements of the CNSC.
Thank you. I think I should go back to the GE-Hitachi to comment on this.
For the record, Paul Desiri. Just want to say that as a company, we take public information seriously, and that if we look back to the licensing of the facility in 2010, it's important to distinguish between compliance and program improvement. And at the time, we were meeting the requirements of our procedure. We had a certain amount of tasks we had to do, activities that are defined in the program, and we fulfilled all of those. In the hearing, it was discussed about certain improvements we needed to make, and we made the improvements, and we stand here today, and we've already talked about all the things we've done in the past year. We want to do a good job in public information. I mean, we want to hear from people like EMP on how we can do a better job, because that's what we see as the main purpose of this meeting. I just want to say that some of the things we do as far as making the program as good as it needs to be, it's not just a matter of looking at the guidelines, but we also compared our program to other industries within the nuclear industry to try to identify best practices and measures that we could use to improve our program. I just want to highlight one of the sections in there that deals with communications with elected officials. So the program at the time of our relicensing called for notifications to elected officials to be made, and those were done. Currently, our program calls to do more frequent communications, and we have done those. So MP Schein mentioned the tour. He didn't mention that all of the public notifications that we've posted to our website and our open house notifications we've also sent to him. And we do thank him for sending representatives to our open house. So there is, I'd say, more exchange going on. We're more than happy to sit down at any time with him and discuss how we can improve our program going forward.
Thank you. We got to move on. Ms. Velshi?
Mr. Schein, you were one of the drivers behind the soil testing that was done. You've gone and toured the facility, and you've seen their performance. So putting aside the public information program, and we can debate on that, but looking at the safety of this facility, as a resident of that community, are you satisfied that this is a safe facility?
You know, I'm not a nuclear scientist, and I, trust health experts. However, I also believe that people have a right to know where they live. And if you live in Darlington or Pickering, you know that you're living next to a nuclear facility. And I think people deserve the right to know what's operating, and my concern remains that they haven't been given that right. And having a one-year review that would have happened in Ottawa if we had not asked you to come here is not acceptable, and that in fact people feel like they don't have a say because this license was renewed for 10 years in 2010. And I believe people do have a right to know what's in their community, to be informed, and it's up to them to decide. Well, it's up to the regulator to ensure that the facility is safe, and our health authorities, and I trust that you'll do that job. However, as I've said, that trust wavers when the basic parts of a licensing agreement are not met, and that is concerning, and I hope that that will be addressed.
But my question to you was specifically as a resident of the community, where you have had access to all this information. Are you comfortable, are you confident that this is a safe operation?
I think I've been quite clear. I could have a tour of my dentist office or any facility in this city, and not being an expert in that field, I can't tell you whether it's safe or not. My concern is that I'm here before you today, and that it's been quite clear that the company didn't meet its agreement, and yet I'm hoping that you'll come to the conclusion that the community should have a say, and that you should make that the decision should be made by going through the proper means. Now, if you're telling me that the public information program is not part of the compliance, then that's a different story. But as far as I understand it, was part of the compliance, part of the agreement that should have been met, and until that's met properly, then I don't think that there should be a 10-year license in place. And I don't think that there was a 10-year license in place at this facility ever before.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Any final words?
No, again, I appreciate all of you. I know it's been a long day for a lot of folks, and I trust that all players want to do the right thing, and I hope that you'll give the community a chance by opening that license. Thank you very much.
Thank you.